morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, out of Voice of Radio. So today, well, we've got a new Morpeko to look at, but this new Morpeko is a little bit weird. You see, we've had a bunch of Morpeko. There was one in Sword and Shield, there was one in Rebel Clash, there were two different promos, we had a Pokemon V, we had a Pokemon V Max, and over in Japan, they've actually had an alternate art version of that same V Max. Same card, different artwork. But you see, all of those were Morpeko full belly mode. But Morpeko had a Hangry mode. We've not seen a Hangry mode Morpeko card so far, or should I say, we hadn't, because we totally have now. Yeah, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. Our first ever Hangry Morpeko, and I'll tell you what, I like this card. Translation from the lovely Antoine Boulet, which at this stage is something you should probably be expecting. Lovely artwork, incidentally. And what we've got is 80 HP to begin with, which is low and a little bit rubbish. And honestly, kind of in line. We've seen a 90 HP Morpeko, but the rest of them have been like 80, so yeah, why not? We got a retreat cost of 1, which gives free retreat with U-turn board, which is always quite nice. We've got a weakness to grass, which is fine. I mean, grass decks just aren't big right now, and maybe if Rillaboom decks become good, yay, etc. But even if they do become good, you still only got 40 HP, double with a weakness to be KO'd. So it's not like people are going to struggle to KO you, whether hitting for weakness or not. And you're a Darkness Pokemon. Now, this is actually really nice for Black Market Prism Star, which, remember, is going to rotate out in Japan in the not-too-distant future, but we will be keeping it. And that means that if you get KO'd with Darkness Energy attached, you don't give up a prize, which is quite nice. It also means it fits very neatly into Eternatus decks. Remember, Eternatus can have a bench of 8 Pokemon, but only if you only play Darkness. And then for 2 energy, you do 30 damage for each Darkness Pokemon you've got in play. So, some pretty nice basic Darkness Pokemon with fairly low retreat costs, which, although to be fair, hiding Darkness Energy will always give free retreat, which can be used to back up and give alternate attackers. Yes, this sounds alright to me. But is it worth playing as an alternate attacker? Well, 1 colourless energy, put 1 item card from your discard pile into your hand. Oh. It's kind of like half of a Sableye. And the thing is, and we know it's very deliberately half of a Sableye, and we know it's very deliberately half of a Sableye, because Sableye rotated out of Standard, and then got banned and expanded, as did Oranguru, incidentally, which is another one of these recovery cards. So, by making you only able to recover 1 card, what the card designers are basically doing is saying, you can give yourself a little bit of an advantage, but you're not going to make a Sableye-style recovery deck. We're not going to let you do that. We don't like those decks. We're not into those decks. You don't get to do that. And it's very on the nose, and it's very deliberate, and this is essentially what's happening here. They want to make sure that you don't have that Sableye-style deck. Now remember, Sableye also had Puzzle of Time when it was really big, so it's not necessarily a terribly fair comparison. But Puzzle of Time, which has also been banned and expanded, and yet Sableye also got banned even without Puzzle of Time being around, it just let you recover any 2 cards to your hand. So essentially, Sableye would constantly just junk hunt the 2 Puzzle of Time, and then Puzzle of Time would turn into literally any 2 cards you wanted from your discard. But Morpeko doesn't do that. What Morpeko does is a little bit less pronounced. So, for instance, if you're desperate for a boss's orders in the late game, Morpeko is not going to get you boss's orders. But Morpeko can get you a Pal Pad, which will shuffle a couple of boss's orders into your deck, and then when you play something like a Crobat or things along those lines, you can maybe draw into it. If your opponent's got a damaged Pokemon with a Big Charm and the only thing stopping him being KO'd is a Big Charm, your Morpeko can get back your 1 Tool Scrapper. And this could be big, like if there's an Arceus and Alga and Palkia that's sitting there with 290 damage on, you can go and get yourself a Tool Scrapper, and even if your opponent sees what you're doing, most ADP decks aren't playing any way to protect them. So when you play that Tool Scrapper, you are going to get those free prizes. And that's when it's worth using an attack like this. Randomly just getting back a quick ball to search out a Pokemon, you'll do it in the early game when you're desperate. And to be fair, early game, when you have nothing else to do, this is actually a really cool card. Just get yourself an item card back and it does go to your hand. You can play it straight away. In the early game, especially, some decks just don't have a great turn 1 option. This is cool. In terms of the mid to late game, it is for those desperation plays, those I desperately need another Tool Scrapper, Power Pad, whatever, and it can make a difference, but it's not a reason to play the card. It's a bonus, I think, is the best way to put it. The reason to play the card is Hangry Tackle. 1 Darkness Energy, 20 damage, but if you have no cards in your hand, this attack does 110 damage. And 110 for a single energy on a basic Pokemon is good. This should give you a little bit of a flashback to Hooper, but this is not Hooper. Remember, Hooper does 90 damage for a single energy if it became active this turn, but crucially, Hooper does not let you hit weakness. This absolutely does let you hit weakness, and that is huge, ladies and gentlemen, absolutely huge, because Oricorio is still a thing. And right now, in terms of Darkness Weakness, there are Pokemon out there, but Oricorio is definitely the biggest one. Oricorio sees a whole bunch of play. It's a 2-prize GX Pokemon that sits on the bench, and if you had a Pokemon KO the previous turn, you get to draw 3 cards. And it doesn't stack, you can only use 1 of those abilities per turn. But the other great thing about Oricorio, for you, is that it's a GX, so Great Catcher will work. Great Catcher will get Oricorio, it will get Dedenne, it will drag him into the active, it won't work on something like Crobat, which means that if you want to play Great Catcher, and I frequently do in a bunch of my decks, it's going to give you an advantage if your opponent is going for things like this. And now, all of a sudden, you've got a single energy, single prize basic Pokemon that can get a 1-hit KO on an Oricorio. And you can play someone like Boss's Orders, don't get me wrong, but Great Catcher is just a really nice advantage to have. And that's where I see this. Now, don't get me wrong, you'll get plenty of other single prize Pokemon as well. So, if your opponent's trying to draw cards with Jirachi, you can get a nice big KO. Galarian Zigzagoon is frequently played as a tech. That will go down. Evolving decks, as in any that rely on evolution, their lower evolutions will go down. Hang on a second, didn't I flash up another part of the attack on the screen when I gave you the translation? Yes, I did. It's not just 110 damage, it's 110 damage if you have 0 cards in hand. So, it's not Granbull, but it's clearly the spiritual successor to Granbull. Remember, Granbull was a stage 1 Pokemon that for a single energy did 160 if there was 0 cards in your hand. Clearly, this is not that. There's a big difference between 110 and 160, but it's still a very similar kind of thing. It is worth pointing out there is another Pokemon around at the moment that will actually have your back in a deck along these lines. The Woobat from Vivid Voltage, for 1 Psychic Energy, did 30 damage to each of your opponent's Pokemon as long as you had 0 cards in hand. And then, of course, do please bear in mind, we recently got Telescopic Sight, so all of your attacks that hit the bench do an extra 30 to benched Vs and GXs. So there is a deck here where you're spreading with Woobat, spreading with Woobat, spreading with Woobat, and then cleaning up with Morpeko. Although it is very much worth pointing out these are very weak Pokemon, so even if your opponent's struggling to set up, they're going to be getting KOs here, which is a potential problem. In terms of emptying your hand, I mean, I've already mentioned Great Catcher. That is a great way to do it. You got 3 cards in hand, one's a Great Catcher. Great Catcher up your opponent's Oricorio, 0 card hand, boom, KO. You've got all those cards like Quick Ball that will naturally empty your hand. You've got Rose, which will actually work really nicely in an Eternatus deck. Rose lets you attach 2 energy basic from your discard pile to one of your VMAXs, but you have to discard your entire hand in order to do so. But that's fine, because then you've got the energy on your Eternatus, and then you're attacking with Morpeko, which seems pretty nice to me. It's going to be a good turn if you can get a KO with Morpeko while using Rose to build up an Eternatus. The other option we've got, and it's one that I mention a lot, but one that nobody ever seems to play, which makes me sad, is the Duskull from Cosmic Eclipse that just lets you discard 3 cards from your hand. You can search for a Dusclops to evolve if you've got one and you want to, but mostly it's just used for emptying your hand if you can't otherwise. It is worth bearing in mind if you are going to be doing this, you need some way to build your hand back up again. Rose Tower will do it. It's a stadium that lets you draw until you've got 3 cards in your hand. Clearly, great combo with Rose here, not a coincidence. You can play Sylvalai, lets you draw until you've got 5 cards in your hand, though do obviously please bear in mind that that will not work in an Eternatus deck, because it's not a Darkness Pokemon. And then there's all kinds of other bench sitters like Oranguru that will help, although not a huge amount, or just play extra consistency, things along those lines. Honestly, Zebstrika would have been amazing, discard your hand, draw 4 cards, but Zebstrika rotated, which makes me very sad. I'm using Zebstrika in my playthrough of Pokemon White at the moment, but it's not the same. This is not a terribly easy card to use. It's awkward in the first attack, isn't quite as good as we remember and quite as good as we'd like. And the second attack, you do have to have an empty hand to use it. But make no mistake, both of these attacks could be rather useful. And I like the idea of making it, wait, I've got no hand deck. So I'm going to go ahead and give this between 3 and 4 Wassies. We don't give half Wassies. That would be barbaric. But as always, I am rather excited to know what you think about this, how good you think it could be, and how happy you are that we finally got a Hangry Morpeko. So go nuts in the comment section, would ya? But be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWassie, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCG Radio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that good stuff, head on over to patreon.com/PTCG Radio, where you can do exactly that. But by far the most important thing as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.